For decades, we've been talking about what companies owe to society, but the way we think about that responsibility is completely changed. We've gone from just doing good as a side project to actually building good into the business itself. So let's dive into this huge evolution, the journey from CSR to ESG. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with the big question. Is just being good really enough? Then we'll look at the old standard, CSR, and pinpoint its big flaw. After that, we'll get into the new strategy, ESG, and I'll break down what E, S, and G actually mean. And finally, we'll see how your choices are shaping the future of business. All right, let's jump right into the big conflict that's really defined business for generations. It seems like a simple question, right? Can a company do well just by being charitable, or is there more to the story? This single question has been at the center of debate in boardrooms and shareholder meetings for years and years. In this image, it just perfectly captures that traditional mindset. You've got profitability over here on one side of the scale, which for a long time was seen as the only purpose of a business. And on the other side, you've got social responsibility, doing good deeds. For the longest time, everyone saw these two things as total opposites. So, the first real attempt to try and balance these scales came in the form of something I'm sure we've all heard of, corporate social responsibility, or CSR. So, what is CSR really? At its heart, it's about philanthropy. Think about a company making big donations, sponsoring a local Little League team, or organizing employee volunteer days. It's how a company gives back. But the most important word here, voluntary. It was a choice. What's so telling about this is how it shows CSR as this separate thing. It was completely detached from the main engine of the business. It was something a company did with its profits, not something that had anything to do with how it made those profits. It was basically a bonus, a side project. And right there, in that separation, in that side project mentality, well, that's where we find the critical weakness in the entire model. So you're probably thinking, okay, if companies were donating money and helping out, what's the big deal? What could possibly be wrong with that? And honestly, the problem wasn't the intention, it was the shaky foundation the whole thing was built on. See, the real issue with CSR is that because it was totally disconnected from the business, it was treated like a marketing expense, a cost. This led to a lot of superficial efforts, what we now call greenwashing. But the biggest flaw, the fatal flaw, was how fragile it was. When times got tough and profits dipped, CSR was always the first thing on the chopping block. It just wasn't built to last. And this right here, this is the smoking gun. When a company hit a rough patch and profits went down, what was the very first budget to get slashed? You guessed it, CSR. The good work only happened in the good times, which proved it was never really essential to the company's core strategy. Okay, so this is where the story takes a really interesting turn. The obvious flaws in CSR created a demand for a much smarter, more resilient approach. It became super clear that to create real, lasting change, doing good for society and the environment couldn't just be an afterthought. It had to be baked into the blueprint from the very beginning. And that's where ESG comes in: environmental, social, and governance. Now, this is not about giving away money after it's been made. It's a completely different mindset. It's a strategic framework that weaves these factors directly into how a company makes money, all with the goal of creating real, sustainable, long-term value. This new model completely rebalances those scales we saw earlier. Instead of seeing profit on one side and social good on the other, ESG says they belong together. The core idea behind ESG is that being responsible, environmentally, socially, and in how you run the company, actually leads to better, more stable profits in the long run. This table just lays it all out, plain and simple. Where CSR was all about spending money, ESG is about a new way of earning it. CSR was separate from the business. ESG is totally integrated into the core strategy. And maybe the biggest shift? CSR was seen as a cost, while ESG is viewed as an investment in a stronger, more profitable future. It's a total switch from managing your image to actually creating value.
Okay, so what do these three letters actually mean in the real world? Let's break them down one by one.
First up, we've got E for environmental. This is all about a company's relationship with the planet. We're talking about everything from its carbon footprint and how much energy it uses to how it manages waste and resources. In the ESG world, managing environmental risk isn't just a cost, it's a huge opportunity for innovation. Next is S for social, and this one is all about people. How does a company treat its employees, its customers, and its community? This covers fair labor practices, diversity and inclusion, employee health and safety, even how it protects your data. A company that nails the S factor builds an incredibly loyal workforce and customer base. And finally, G for governance. You can think of this as the company's internal rulebook, or maybe its nervous system. It's all about how the company is run. Is the leadership transparent? Is executive pay fair? Are there rules to prevent corruption? Good governance is the absolute bedrock of trust and stability. So we've seen this incredible shift, right? From a really simple, kind of fragile model to one that's way more complex and built in. But what's actually driving this change? And honestly, this might be the most important takeaway of all. This entire revolution isn't just happening in some fancy boardroom. It's being driven by us, by all of us, as consumers, as employees, and as investors. We are actively choosing to buy from, work for, and invest our money in companies that actually align with our values. Our choices are forcing them to change. And that brings us to the final thought here. The old CSR model was about a company's choice to do a little good. But this new world of ESG, it's all about our power to demand it. So the next time you spend your money, invest for your future, or choose a place to work, you're casting a vote. You're a stakeholder. The only question is, which future are you building?